Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is Kid Nate of BloodyElbow.com, joined by Dallas Winston for our UFC on Fox 5 Henderson versus Diaz preview and breakdown. Dallas, you fighting with the cat there? You got pussy problems?
Yes, times two, and metaphorically and literally.
Well, just try to keep him in line. Try to keep him in line. We're going to be breaking down every fight on the card. Dallas, of course, is the reigning Bloody Elbow expert. He does the Bloody Elbow dissections on every fight on every card, so he knows these guys backwards and forwards, inside and out. I guarantee you, if you're betting on these fights, well, you're on your own. But I highly recommend paying attention to what Dallas has to say before making your bets, and we're not responsible for any losses incurred thereby. Dallas, before we start on the card, we're going to start at the bottom, work all the way up to the top to the headline in UFC lightweight title fight between Vincent Henderson and Nate Diaz. But first, anything special you're watching? Anything about this event overall that you're feeling?
It's good, for sure. I mean, top to bottom, I think it's pretty stacked. Not necessarily with big, huge names, but with compelling fights. I did notice I always kind of reference the betting odds, just because to me that's kind of like a standard for what the consensus outlook on the fights are. And I don't think that anybody's favored in the 300 range, meaning they're all pretty fairly, competitive. I want to say like minus 280 was the highest favorite. So that, to me, that's just kind of a rough indicator that they're all competitive matchups and pretty difficult to call.
Yeah. I think the only minus 300s I'm seeing here are some for Dennis Seaver against Nam Fan and a couple for Abel Trujillo against Tim Means. No, Tim Means over Abel Trujillo. That makes more sense.
Yep,
Makes more
Means
sense.
I think was the biggest favorite, and that makes sense. He's been killing people, so.
Yeah. Well, let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the Facebook fight. There's only one Facebook fight this time. It's a bantamweight fight between Scott Jorgensen and tough veteran, Ultimate Fighter veteran, John Albert. Who you got? What do you think about this fight?
Oh, shit. Get out of here, you stupid kitty! Fat cat just spilled my... Sorry, everything's fine.
That's what you get for drinking root beer, Dallas.
That's right. I'm addicted to it, too. But there are worse vices out there.
There are worse vices.
Actually, I really like this fight. Albert kind of reminds me of... there seems to be a typical mold of a tough fighter that kind of blends in on the show, doesn't show you too much. But then once they come out in the octagon, they're pretty surprising. Seiler would be one. Even a guy like Matt Riddle. But I think,
Riddle.
Yeah, but I think this I mean, Albert's been kind of like that. I mean, he big brothered Dustin Peg, and Peg's not a world beater, but that was such a one-sided ass kicking. He gift wrapped them, and to me, that's got to be the most humiliating position in MMA. That harkens back to Lober Shamrock 1 back in a Super Brawl. The first time I saw that, it's the kind where you just kind of wince a little, going, "Damn, son, tap." We need to get this fight over with in a hurry. So to me, he showed that he wasn't just another tough chump and that he did have some potential. He's a young guy. He's the kind of guy that his spirit and his strength and just kind of like he's got kind of like a street fighting mentality, and that trumps all of his, he doesn't have the real laudable technical skill on a wide range. And in part, he's going to need that because Jorgensen he's a really good wrestler, Pac-10 champion. If I can say this carefully, I think Jorgensen is the kind of guy where no one can be one-dimensional in the UFC. He's about as close as it gets. If he can impose his wrestling and he's forced to stand up, he's not an A-level fighter. And his last two fights, that's been the key. Barao and who was it? Was it Eddie Wineland?
Eddie Wineland made him look really bad, I thought.
Yeah, he did, and I think I don't like to use the word expose because that sounds really harsh, but if you whittle Scott Jorgensen down to striking only and take away his wrestling, it's painfully basic, pretty much. But I think Jorgensen, he used to be a top 5 bantamweight. One loss, he was a top 10er. He's a tough kid. There's no way you can overlook him. I think he deserves to be the favorite, and from a betting standpoint, he's the safer pick. But I definitely think Albert's a really live dog. He's a really big guy for a bantamweight, really mean striking. I don't think again, he'll have like the real technical fundamentals down for like a textbook sprawl and brawl. But he's big and strong, and he's going to punch Jorgensen in the face really hard every time he tries. I think if he does get put on his back, he's going to be in big trouble. Not that Jorgensen's a total demon from the top. I mean, he has, KO'd people from inside the guard before. But
Yeah.
that's where it's slanted way over. I think it's kind of evenly slanted, where Jorgensen's at just as much of an advantage on the floor as Albert will be on the feet. Of course, the difference is it starts on the feet. Um, so actually, I don't know. I think Jorgensen's a safer pick, but Albert, the more I think about it, he's a live dog. I wouldn't rule him out at all. I'll go Jorgensen by decision.
Yeah, I have to concur with you there, but I think one factor we haven't brought up is both these guys are riding 2 losses in a row. They're both on 2-fight losing streaks. Frequently, that's time to get cut. I'd be kind of surprised if Jorgensen got cut just because he's got 2 wins in the UFC right now. He's 2-2 in the UFC, and he was in the WEC for like 3-4 years. He was in there for like 10 fights and only lost 3. So. You'd think that would count and keep him around. He's been kind of a staple of the UFC and the Zuffa's bantamweight division for a while. But anything can happen if you lose 3 fights in a row in the UFC. It might be time for Jorgensen to go down, take a tour in the minor leagues, get things together, work on his striking. If he loses this fight, which neither of us think he will, although Albert is going to be a formidable test
I
for
really
Mr.
don't think
Jorgensen.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't think either of these guys should be cut really, because Jorgensen lost to perennial top 10 guys in Barao,
Yeah,
and
Barao currently the interim champion.
in Wineland's kind of the same as Jorgensen. He's been floating around in the WEC forever. He
He's
doesn't
a
always
former champ.
Yeah, he's not the guy that you'd stand out when you think who are the best guys in the WEC, but he's been
He's been on
banging.
a tear. He's
Yeah,
been
and
on a tear.
he's the kind of guy he's been staying afloat in the division, forever, just like Jorgensen. And Albert, he's such a young guy, and it's kind of backwards. We didn't mention he lost to Perez by armbar, and that was a little controversial because it was one of those forced stoppages where he cried out in pain. And
Yeah, that was kind of a bullshit stoppage. I have to say I was outraged at the time and have since forgotten about it completely. If you hadn't reminded me.
well, we started talking about that a little in the dissection and the comments of that, and it's one, really.
Now, was
This
Albert the guy that Menjivar murked with the standing elbows?
No, that was Charlie Valencia, but
Yeah,
Albert was putting it on Menjivar early in that fight.
I remember.
And that was another, it was a loss, but that was eye opening. It was like, damn, Menjivar's a, real scrappy veteran. So Albert's got a lot of room to grow. And I was going to say this is kind of backwards because Albert has now lost to a couple lower guys on the totem pole, and now he's fighting his best competition yet, down 2 losses. So I wouldn't, if it were up to me, I'd like to see both of them stay, regardless, win or lose.
Yeah, well, it's not up to us. So I would look for the loser of this
What?
fight to get cut because it's a hard,
Yeah.
cruel, cold world, and Sean Shelby and the guys at Zuffa they got business decisions to make. So let's move to the FX card. We've got 6 fights on the FX card. What do you think of it overall as an entertainment package? Do you think it's going to entice people to change the channel to Fox? Is this a hot preview package for the card?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so. I have trouble putting on the lens of like the casual viewer and looking at mainstream perspectives and things like that because it's so alien to me. I don't,
Just drink a few beers and cross your eyes really hard.
yeah, that'll be par for the course. Actually,
Yeah.
that's my pre-dissection ritual right there. Actually,
Okay, take a 2x4 and smash yourself in the face several times. Put on a tap-out shirt, and you're set.
just bleed. I
Just
think so.
believe
I
it.
mean, this wouldn't be. I don't think it's going to come to mind as one of the best undercards of the year or whatever. But I mean, it's rock solid. The top half of the card is really good. Bottom half is not as big as not real big names, but should be good scraps. So decent to good, I'd say.
Up first, we've got a featherweight fight that I think does have some implications for the division because we've got Dennis Seaver, former lightweight. I think this is his 3rd featherweight fight, second or third fight.
Second.
Yeah, second in the featherweight division. He's fighting Nam Phan, who's been up and down in the featherweight division in the UFC. He hasn't really made a splash, although he's had some good wins. But Dennis Seaver is somebody that they're looking to put together a title run here. The 33-year-old German, or Russian by way of Germany. He beat Diego Nunez in what I thought was an excellent fight back in April on UFC on Fuel. And I thought that sent a message to the division. I mean, Diego Nunez is one of these guys who's as physically talented as they come, hasn't ever quite put together the complete package to be a contender or a titleist in the UFC. And I thought Seaver sent a message that here I am, I'm for real, I'm big for this division, I'll kick your ass. Here I come, I'm coming for the title. You think Nam Phan's going to slow him down?
I think he could. Yeah. When there's been a lot of guys dropping down, and I always it kind of annoys some of the readers, but I have kind of a formula in that whenever you drop down, you should expect your quickness to be more planed off. It doesn't make sense to say you lose quickness, but the overall level of quickness with the lower weight classes is so much higher that it somewhat dilutes your quickness. But you should obviously expect to have a little bit more of a strength and size advantage than you were used to at your normal higher weight. I think Ross Pearson is a real good example. To me, that drop didn't make any sense at all, because he's not the kind of guy where physical size and strength plays into his game whatsoever. He sits out and strikes. It's all about quickness and that kind of thing. Seaver, I expected kind of the same with the Ross Pearson thing, but I was really surprised. Yes, number one, it was a defining performance, and kind of with me scrutinizing how his weight cut would go, I was a little skeptical about it, and he looked good. He looked fast. He's going to be a monster. I mean, that dude he is so short and stocky. I mean, he's like a little fire hydrant for the weight class.
Yeah, he's got so many muscles in his back. He looks almost like he's humpbacked, but he's not. He's just got so much beef. The lats are huge. The shoulders are huge. Thick neck. I would not want to be standing across the octagon from him, especially if you're a finesse fighter like Nam Phan. I really just don't see anything Nam Phan has in his arsenal that's really going to damage Seaver. I think his best bet would be to outpoint Seaver with quickness, but Seaver's pretty technically sound. I don't think he's easy to outpoint on the feet.
I would agree he's not easy to outpoint. I mean, just all you have to do is watch the dude fight, and I mean, he's a beast. But this to me boils down as kind of a brawler versus boxer, and that's a
brawler with a spinning back kick.
Right, and I was just going to say you always have to. That's an old boxing term you have to modify for MMA, but I don't know if I would call Seaver really technically. It's not that he's not technically correct, and even that gets skewed in MMA because the way you're often taught in the gym. Someone just had a really good quote on that. It's what's always effective. I don't know. I'm going to fuck all that up, but what's the way it's supposed to be done isn't always the way that you need to do it in MMA, and sometimes sloppy shit works is what I'm trying to say. If you punch someone in the head or kick them in the head and they fall down, you're doing it right, and it doesn't matter if your footwork's off, your technique is off, or any of that stuff. That being said, Seaver is far from a traditional type of striker. He's the kind of dude where it's almost like that European style of boxing, but when he throws his hands, I mean, homeboy's got his arms down, he throws them from the pockets, and he will just, back and forth sling,
Yep.
and he generates a ton of power. It makes everyone think twice about coming into his wheelhouse, but that does mean that there are some holes there that could be exploited. I do think Phan is a really technical boxer. I don't know top 10 or top 20 or whatever, but when I think technical boxing guys in MMA, Nam Phan would be somewhere on that list. If anything, he's been a little bit exposed, and I was surprised because he's always been tabbed as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, which he is. But man, he just got smoked on the floor.
By Jimmy Hedis? Is that what you're
And
thinking?
Mike Brown before that in the first round. It was
Yeah.
just a weird little situation where it was one mistake and Brown was able to just hop on. Phan was kind of on his side, so it was kind of a cross between full mount and side control, but I mean, he just got dominated for the first round. So from that point, even though it's not really Seaver's style, I would like to see him throw in a surprise takedown every now and
Seaver
then.
has thrown in some takedowns before. I can remember
Yeah.
him. He's the kind of guy I think who's coming from a kickboxing background, and early in his MMA career, racked up a bunch of losses while he was learning the submission game. But I think Seaver's more than happy to throw in the odd takedown. His grappling and his sprawl game totally threw off George Soteropoulos. Seaver ended Soteropoulos' run at the title for sure, and I don't know. Seaver's favored by almost all the odds makers, sometimes as much as -300. Who you got in this one?
I'm You freak me out when you say about the betting thing because I always try to give a real legit, straightforward analysis, but I pick like whoever the hell I want. So this is going to be my long shot pick because I do like Nam Fan. He's a real good guy. I'm going to take him for the upset here. I don't think
Wow.
it's super likely. I have to do this for every card, just throw out because it makes it a lot more exciting, and then that
So
way
give me your scenario, your victory scenario for Nam Fan over Dennis Seaver.
in and out boxing. He's a super technical boxer. He's got good head movement. The thing that makes me a little bit nervous is Fan is really good with like his when he wings that left hook to the body. He does a real good job of setting it up. He pivots hard and cuts an angle. But when he's throwing that, that's a spot where one of Siver's big blender shots could lunch him. So it's not likely, but I do think Fan has a good chance as long as he doesn't get in a brawl. I think after the Garcia fight, and there's a couple other ones where he noticeably would get a guy in a corner and just unload, like Seaver does, both hands, just saying, I don't want to go to another judge's decision. I want to knock this dude's head off. That's a bad choice against Seaver. If he's real technical, real in and out, and really moves into that tactical finesse role and lets Seaver do his brawling thing, I think he can outpoint him and work out a close unanimous decision or a split decision.
Cool. Well, controversial pick there from Dallas Winston. Going to take Nam Fan. I'm going to take Dennis Seaver all the way, baby. I think Seaver's headed for a title run. I don't think he's going to be a champion, but I think he might. He's probably going to stop one fight short of a title shot. That's my prediction, but I don't think Nam Pham's the guy who's going to stop his run. Up next, we got lightweights Tim Means and Abel Trujillo. What do you think about this one?
For some reason, I'm a sucker for like real lengthy guys, like real gangly, like Ben Saunders, and guys who can really use their length like that. And Means, man, I mean, he is so long for a lightweight. I think he's got a 75-inch reach,
Yep,
and he's
six
six
foot
foot
two.
two. And that right there, along with his striking, I mean, the dude proved that he can not only throw his hands but knock people out.
And
Um,
Trujillo's just 5'8", making his octagon debut against a much bigger fighter.
Yeah, and I'm not sure on Trujillo. I know he's out of the Black Zillions. He's got a couple wins in a row, but I believe those came off some back-to-back losses to not premier names.
He's
So
got 4 wins in a row,
yeah,
but none of them are big names. And
and I believe he was an NAIA All-American, or he had some good lower-level college wrestling credentials. Good, strong guy, big guy. He'll be looking pretty much to ground Means. We haven't seen a lot of Means on the ground. I mean, he's on a killer roll right now. I want to say 17 of his last 18, former King of the Cage lightweight champion. Um,
mhm.
Means all the way on this one, TKO.
Yeah, he hasn't lost since 2010, and he's just been on a tear. He's 2-0 in the UFC. Um, yeah, I don't see any way Abel Trujillo. I mean, Trujillo is one of these guys. He's going to be fighting the octagon jitters. He's going straight onto FX. Like a lot of guys get to come to the octagon, be on a fuel card, debut on Facebook. Trujillo's coming in on FX, which is a pretty big spotlight for a young guy. Um, with the height advantage Means has and the hot streak he's on, this smacks of a gimme. Is this a late minute substitute or something? That's the only thing I can think of is like this match doesn't necessarily make a great
Don't
deal of
ask
sense.
questions like that unless we know
Yes,
him, maybe.
sorry, I'm like that's the violation of the prosecutor. Yes, yes. So Abel, no, this is a reschedule of a UFC 151 match that was rescheduled. So was the Seaver bout. Although Seaver was supposed to fight Eddie Yeagan, which makes a little more sense than Nam Fan.
Yeah.
Huh. So no real understanding of the reason here. I mean, certainly don't object to them giving Tim Means a warm up, and Trujillo make us eat our words. Well, let's move
Yep.
on to the next one. Lightweights Darren Cruikshank and Henry Martinez. I believe we got some Ultimate Fighter veterans here, and Cruikshank.
Yep.
Um,
He's a Michigander. Good dude. I like him. He's been involved in martial arts since he was a little kid. His dad, I believe, is a pro MMA fighter, and his mother was a professional kickboxer. And he was involved with karate or taekwondo, one of the two. And I like that he brings some of those elements, into his MMA game. Tough guy. I actually talked to him before this, and he doesn't have. It's tough to assess someone's submission grappling nowadays because before you could say, what's your belt, in the gi, what's your belt color? And he just hasn't been a no-gi guy. It's like Yves Edwards, who we'll talk about in a little bit. He doesn't have any accomplishments or a fancy belt color, but he's easily at the black belt level in MMA, I believe. So Cruikshank's a tough guy, pretty dynamic. I think he's going to have a little bit of height and reach on Martinez as well.
Yep.
I know I wasn't the only one that was blown away when Martinez debuted as a welterweight, a normal lightweight against Matt Riddle. And of course, Riddle isn't a stellar striker, but man, Martinez, it was astounding. His timing and his boxing. He was popping off combinations every time Riddle came in. He was almost toying with him for a while there.
He did well enough for one of the judges to give him the win, but the other two judges voted against him. And since he's come down to lightweight, I think he's much more comfortable. He looked good in his last fight against Bernardo Magalhães. Although Magalhães is somebody that got washed out of the UFC in fairly short order. I don't know how indicative of where Martinez is talent-wise against UFC caliber competition a win over Magalhães is.
And that could be another one with what I was just talking about, where the reason Martinez could have looked so sweet is obviously Riddle's not a top striker, but he was a lightweight up at welterweight, and the speed advantage that could have been some part of it. I don't know how much. But as soon as he went down to 155, and maybe it's Treco, we're underrating him. Maybe he's a lot tougher than we realize. But to me, now the jury's still out after Martinez's second fight, first at lightweight. This is still a bit of a coin flip, though. I'm just going to kind of lean towards Cruikshank on this one. I think he can get a decision here.
Yeah, I think I'll go with you. The odds makers have Cruikshank anywhere from minus 120 to minus 145, so everybody sees this as a close fight. I think probably because they don't know a ton about these fighters. I'm going to go with Martinez just to go against the Ultimate Fighter. Not really a logical decision, but just I like seeing those tough guys get smoked. So maybe Martinez will do it. I think Martinez should have the boxing advantage. I don't know if that'll be enough to overcome the more complete package Cruikshank's got. All right, another lightweight fight. We've got Ramsey Najim against who's he fighting? Joe Proctor. Yep, Joe Proctor. What do you think about this one?
I really like what Najim has done post-tough. You can really see John Hackleman's influence coming through. He seems just to be putting it together really nice. I think before the vibe I got from him was that he was a fairly inexperienced wrestler who was trying to hone up his skills in the other areas, but wrestling was by far what he felt comfortable with. I guess that was the vibe that I got most, is that he was kind of dabbling around with improving in other areas, but didn't seem comfortable, and he only seemed comfortable wrestling. After the show, he seems like he's putting it together. He seems like an MMA fighter with a wrestling base rather than a one-dimensional wrestler. His striking has looked pretty good.
Yeah,
and
he knocked out CJ Keith last time, or at least beat him down for a TKO, which was pretty impressive.
I was going to say his striking on his ground and pound is where it's really got nasty. I think that might be another thing. When you're a wrestler, you learn to wrestle for the rules, of wrestling only. And now he's learning how to, lock people down, get up in that high half guard, and just, smack people from the top. Proctor, I didn't watch that season of The Ultimate Fighter a lot, but he's a legit guy. He's another guy that wrestling background, and he seemed a little uncomfortable when he couldn't implement that. It's not so much of anything negative I see in Proctor, but I'm kind of high on Najim right now, so I'm going to go with Najim by TKO in this one.
By TKO. I'm going to go with Najim by decision. I think the odds makers, everybody's favoring Najim. It looks like anywhere from minus 150 to minus 200. So we're in good company there. I'm going to nothing to be ashamed of about those picks, kiddies.
I picked Najim by decision on the dissection too, for whatever that's worth.
I see. Now you're upping it to TKO. I think just thinking about that Hackleman ground and pound game.
That's right.
Get you hankering. Well, here comes some fights that I'm getting pretty pumped about. We've got Rafael Asankao against Mike Easton. Mike the Hulk Easton, a guy for the D.C. area that I saw fight in Virginia a number of times. One of the most physically promising talents in the bantamweight division. I don't know that he's quite put it together all the way in his UFC run so far. You think Asankao's the man to stop him?
He could be. Easton's another guy I'm having a little trouble getting a good beat on as far as, what is he good at? What is his super good strength? And it could be he doesn't have one specialty, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, he's somebody that physically seems like he should be a wrestle boxer, but he just doesn't have the wrestling to put that game together. And he's really not an excellent grappler either, even though his coach is Lloyd Irvin, the world champion jiu-jitsu player. Um, Easton's main strength is his power on his feet. He's got good hands, good pop in his hands, although he's not what I would call an especially polished kickboxer. So I think he's really coasting on athleticism as much as anything is that would be my assessment of Easton. Whereas Asankao is somebody who's got an excellent jiu-jitsu game and is a really tough guy, but physically probably isn't the most gifted specimen in the UFC.
I do believe that Easton's a black belt under Lloyd Irvin.
I think he is too, but when I've seen him grapple Chase Beebe in an infamous
Yep.
fight in the UWC where Easton won a split decision, but everybody watching that fight. In fact, there's continual discussion as to whether or not that was a fixed fight. Not that Easton and Beebe were in it, but that somebody got to the judges or something, because it was just fishy. Beebe held the guy down for 5 rounds, was on his back
Had his
over and
back,
over
yeah.
again, and Easton won the decision. That honestly is the biggest black mark on Easton's career. And he followed that up with like almost 2 years, actually 2 years off to recover from
Yep.
some knee injuries, get some surgery. So, he's reeled off 3 straight wins in the UFC. The first one was a TKO against Brian Bloodworth, but he really wasn't all that impressive against Ivan Menjivar. I mean, Menjivar really couldn't do anything to him, but Easton really didn't do a lot to Menjivar either. So, what do you think? Who you got in this one?
I ended up going with Easton by decision. And you're right, the BB fight is the biggest black mark on his record because his only other loss, he broke his arm blocking a high kick, and they had to stop the fight via injury. But BB was a beast, I mean, I don't want to downplay that at all. He's an animal.
Beebe's a very, very excellent fighter, and turning it around, he's managed to put together several, like 5 wins in a row. So maybe we'll see Beebe in the UFC sometime soon.
Yeah, he's legit. A lot of experience too. And Asunciao is, really talented, excellent, black belt level guy, or I guess maybe I should be careful saying that because I don't know for sure, but really legit grappler. His stand-up is pretty decent too. I was pretty surprised he knocked out Tamura in his last fight.
Yeah.
He's more of a, he would be a little bit more on the brawler side, where he should just let his hands go and try to, knock Easton's head off. What I was going to say about Easton, and I totally agree on his athleticism being by far his best trait, but he's been so judicious and methodical. He does not come out and say, hey, I'm going to finish the fight right now, which maybe, the fans don't always appreciate that, but it has been wholly effective for him to get wins in the UFC. And to me, I think that's going to pay dividends against Asunciao too. Asunciao is going to have to just go for broke. Not that he's totally outclassed here, but Easton will force you to stand there and battle in this very kind of grueling, slow-paced boxing match. And he's going to win that fight if he can force it, and I think he'll be able to. So I got Easton by decision.
Yeah, I got Easton by decision too. I think Asankao has pretty long reach. I think he's a knuckle dragger. He's got really long arms. That might be an X factor in the fight. One thing that's odd, most of the odds makers have Easton favored, most of them around -200, some of them as much as -260. But one betting site has Asankao favored by -240, which makes me wonder if they just didn't get the fighters backwards in that one. Because anyway, it's something to look for if you're looking to place some bets. You might want to jump some money on Easton with a +190, because you're not seeing those odds anywhere else. And now we got one fight left on the undercard. This is by far the sexiest fight on the undercard. Yves Edwards, the proprietor of Thug Jitsu, against Jeremy Stevens, who's practiced a little Thug Jitsu himself and has got in trouble with Iowa authorities. He's awaiting trial on a serious assault charge in Iowa. In fact, his arrest on those charges in Minnesota forced the delay of this fight. This fight was supposed to happen a few weeks back in Minnesota. Stevens was arrested. Dana White promised he would put the fight on, get Stevens out of jail, was unable to do so. But now we're back. We're getting a do-over. Who you like in this one?
Really tough fight. Stevens is a guy just like we were saying before. He's just battled, in the division against a lot of the top guys. Mixed results. Again, he fell against a lot of the real top guys. Actually, I was live with his fight with Melvin Gillard, and
That was a frustrating loss for Stevens right there.
yeah, that was a perfect example of a fight where it should have been. I did not walk away from that fight thinking either fighter outperformed the other. I ended up scoring it a draw, and I think it should have been because to me, no one. It's not that no one deserved to win. No one outperformed the other enough to say, "Look, I did this. He didn't do that. I deserve the win."
Yeah, nobody
Um,
walked out of that cage a beaten man for sure.
yeah, I didn't think so. But of course, we have to score everything 10-9 because anything beyond that.
That was a fight where Yard got a lot of, and Greg Jackson, his coach at the time, got a lot of criticism for a cautious approach. And Stevens was frustrated. Yard was too fast for Stevens to force a brawl, and Stevens really couldn't do anything against an in and out hit and run strategy. Then he knocked out Marcus Davis in a fight where he was getting smoked. He beat Danny Downs, but then he's got two losses in a row but both against top guys, Anthony Pettis and Donald Cerrone. And Pettis only got a split decision. So Stevens a tough kid. There's no doubt
Real
about
tough
that.
kid. The Pettis fight was really close, and that was where Stevens really broke out his wrestling, his improved wrestling, which I couldn't think of a better thing for him. He's a brawler who came in as a striker, and right off the bat he got armbarred by Dean Thomas. I remember that because Dean called out, was that Floyd Mayweather or someone after that? He called out a big boxer that was talking shit
Yep,
at the
yep.
time. So Stevens has done a pretty good job of slowly, gradually giving himself another weapon. And for a striker like that, shooting a takedown is the best possible thing, even if you don't do a damn thing, or even if you fail on it, because you can regather and fire off another one. And as you said in our last discussion, it's the best way to keep a guy hesitant on the feet is if he doesn't know if you're coming in with punches or if you're dropping, to attack his hips.
Yeah, although a
Uh,
veteran like Eves Edwards is liable to give you a flying knee to the face if you start telegraphing shots.
Yep, that secondary or auxiliary advantage that Stevens has been working on, I don't think it's going to help him a lot about Edwards for what you just said. And Edwards is a killer off his back. He's a smooth ass grappler, especially in transitions and scrambles. I'll never one of the few picks I felt totally confident in was when he fought Cody McKenzie, and I just to me that was I mean Eves was going to own him on the ground, and he did.
Yep, yep.
But of course, and I don't always like this sentiment, but his chin might be getting a little rubbery at this point. It's hard to say, but
Yeah,
because he's
Sam
only been
Stout smoked him, and although Tony Ferguson couldn't put him down,
no,
you
and
know,
I
Ferguson
like
hit really
Ferguson.
hard.
Yeah, Ferguson's a bad motherfucker, so
He
I don't
is a
hold that
very
against him a
nasty
whole lot.
man.
And that's why I was really surprised that off tangent, but that Michael Johnson beat Ferguson so handily too. It was weird, but anyways,
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with Edwards here, just for his diversity. I think he's going to be a lot cleaner on the feet. He's just so technical in every aspect.
yeah.
Stevens definitely has the power. Same mold as before. Edwards will be the boxer, Stevens will be the brawler, and I think he's pretty much got to worry about Stevens close range like phone booth knockouts. That's kind of it, and I think he can out
Yeah.
finesse him from the outside or submit him on the ground.
I would go with you on this if it wasn't for the fact that Edwards is 36 years old. His chin has shown some definite decay in the past few years. That Sam Stout knockout was a brutal, brutal knockout. It has not been that long ago. That's the kind of thing that the cumulative damage there. KJ Noon smoked him in Strike Force a few years back. And I think Jeremy Stevens hits like a Mack truck. I think Stevens, it could be another Marcus Davis situation where the savvy veteran is going to potentially could make Stevens look bad for 2.5 rounds, get too close, get too sloppy, make one mistake. Stevens is going to put you flat out on your ass. I'm gonna go with Stevens, and from there, the Iowa authorities will be my pick against Stevens. So now we're to the main card. Mike
Sure.
Swick versus Matt Brown for the welterweights. What do you think about this one?
I don't know why, but I'm a big Matt Brown mark. I love the dude. He's one of my favorite fighters in the game right now. Maybe it's just nice to be able to get behind someone that isn't, winning all the time. I mean, he's the
It's
kind of guy
definitely
like,
up and down. One win, one loss. One win, one loss. Although he's
yeah,
got a three-fight winning streak right now, which is pretty impressive.
yeah. He's the kind of guy that no matter what, he's going to come in and give you hell. Every time he fights, and I don't always insist on this like a lot of the fans do, but he's going to go out in a shield one way or another. He's going to look to finish or he's going to get finished, and I respect that out of the guy. He's made some really good strides under Matt Hume. And you know what's strange is he seems to still have a big, his Achilles heel is submission defense, but his submission offense has really done pretty well. Swick is another guy. I mean, it's hard not to like a guy like Swick. I wasn't super impressed with him in his debut. And Swick is another guy that I don't know.
His debut, you mean when he came out of the Ultimate Fighter?
I'm
back
sorry.
in the
No,
day,
when he just came back after the long layoff in his last fight. I don't know. Swick is the kind of guy where it was tough for him because he knocked the piss out of people in like 10 seconds, with the quick Swick thing, and that was good for him. But then it was kind of like I'm not sure if he knew exactly what his best game plan was, because he would try to. It seems like he is always biding his time and waiting for that moment to unreel his hands and do that every time. And that's just my take on it. I don't know if he has a real good format for steadily chugging his way through the round, because just looking to unload knockout blows, it's fun to watch, but it's not always the most effective way to slowly build up your score for the round, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. Swick, my take on Swick was that Yushin Okami chased him out of the middleweight division way back in 2007. And I don't feel like Swick, he put together 4 straight wins as a welterweight, but then he lost to Dan Hardy and Paulo Thiago and basically got smoked by Paulo Thiago. Then he had an intestinal difficulty, was out for 2 years.
That's
so his
right,
last fight against DeMarcus Johnson was his return after that layoff, and I thought he looked pretty good against Johnson. I mean, he knocked him out in the second round. So I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I said I wasn't impressed. It's kind of hard to say that about a second round TKO. Maybe I was holding Swick to a bit of a higher standard.
Yeah,
I really
DeMarcus wasn't looking good in that fight either. It was not one of Johnson's best performances, I have to say.
Yeah, that could be.
I don't know. For me, as much as I like Matt Brown, and boy, his performance against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson at UFC 145 was a humdinger of a fight. I mean, it was an ugly fight, but it was Matt Brown's kind of ugly fight, and it was just nasty and mean, and he hits hard, and he can take a punch, and he can take a kick, and kick you right back, throws knees. I just think this is one of those situations where until Swick just completely falls off the table, I think he's just a higher point on the food chain than Matt Brown. I mean, I think we've got somebody who's at his best UFC contender against somebody who at his best is a UFC gatekeeper. So I got to go with Swick.
Yeah, you're probably right on that, and I have a ton of respect for Swick too. I'm going to go Brown, the American Kazushi Sakuraba.
Wow.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's one of the guys. He reminds me a little bit of like the Diaz brothers. How near are kind of saying, he might as well be one of the Diaz brothers. Just hard nosed, almost socially awkward in interviews. I mean, he basically is like a fighting machine. So yeah, I'm going to stick to my guns, going Matt Brown. I have no idea how. I'll say TKO to make it exciting, but a decision might
we haven't
be likely.
seen a ton of TKOs out of Matt Brown. I think Swick maybe could TKO Brown or get a submission, but I don't see Brown doing it.
I don't believe Brown has ever been knocked out. I think we were joking before this. I don't have my brain in front of me with the Sherdog Fight Finder, but I'm pretty sure Brown has never lost to strikes before, and I don't even remember seeing him get wobbled by strikes. I mean, when he loses, it's decision or submission.
Thompson stunned him a couple times.
Oh yeah, that's true. You're right. He was stumbling around a little bit.
He's got 0 TKO or knockout losses. So Swick's one of those guys who likes to hurt you and then submit you. So he might have trouble putting that game together if he cannot hurt Brown. And the odds makers like Swick, but not by as much as I would have figured. The heaviest odds I see on him are minus 165. So you might have a live dog in your hands there, Dallas.
Yeah, and this is another one where I pick as a fan, because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't even be involved with the sport, But I think Brown from outside his kicks might surprise Swick a little bit, and he's got a really mean clinch game when he gets that tie plumb and uses some of that leverage. A lot of tight elbows and that kind of thing. I think he's going to out-tough Swick. Brown, to me, I don't want to say Swick isn't tough, but like the Paulo Thiago fight, there's times look at Swick's career and then transpose that to Brown's performance against Thompson. I mean, talk about balls, digging deep, never quitting and all those cliches. Matt Brown by chewing tobacco.
Good call. Good call. Well, now we're turning to the portion of the card that's the old lions against the young lions. The first representative fight of that ilk is B.J. Penn against Rory McDonald at welterweight. B.J. Penn, of course, a former UFC welterweight champion, but really only has one win at that weight class against Matt Hughes to take the title way back in 2004. What do you think about this fight? Penn's coming out of retirement, looks to be in the best shape he's been in years. Rory McDonald is on his way up. Who takes it?
Man, it's like BJ Penn. Where do you start with him? Um, First of all, I think he gets treated a little bit unfairly. He gets held to a mythical standard, which is because he's amazing. He's accomplished things
He's a
that no one else
prodigy.
has done in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in the UFC at 155, at welterweight. I mean, he's phenomenal. Um, which should be a good thing, and a lot of people blame it on his quote-unquote nut-hugging fans, which I can understand, but he gets held to a level of greatness. If he doesn't achieve that greatness, are you holding back yawns as I'm
I really
prognosticating
am. I've
here?
got to apologize.
You
I was
slut.
up. I was so
God.
late last night that it's brutal. But my bad. My bad.
I'll let you slide on that. So I like Penn, good guy, or amazing fighter. But if I had to pick one opponent for him at either lightweight or welterweight, that would be the absolute nightmare kryptonite matchup for him. It would be Rory McDonald. Um, I mean, I'm super impressed with Rory, and I look at his fights with Nate Diaz,
He
who is
ragdolled Nate. I mean,
who is
he
yeah.
suplexed him back and forth across the ring. It was easily Nate Diaz's most humiliating fight.
Of any of the Diaz brothers to me,
Oh yeah.
because and I love the Diaz brothers, but it's common for them to have a right after the fight to say, "Look at my face. That that decision was bullshit." But whew, man, Rory. And then even though he ended up losing, the way he fought against Condit in the first two rounds was so intelligent. He is really impressing me for his length, his athleticism, his strength, and the way that he can distance strike with really straight punches and keep his chin protected, and then time perfectly textbook double legs. But the key of what that really stood out to me against both Condit and Nate Diaz, who are killers off their back, was that as soon as he put him on the ground, he never even let his knee touch. I mean, I would say posture up, but that wasn't even it. He would stay on his feet, so he could eject at any time. And he did. He would
Yep.
spend 10, 15 seconds, throw a punch or two, stand back up, and do the whole thing over again.
Do you recall how Condit got him down though to beat him in the third round? Because Condit ended that fight in the mounted position, just put in a beatdown on McDonald that forced the end with only 7 seconds left in the fight.
I believe he got him down with a punch in the face technique.
Oh, that's
I think he
that's
dropped. I
some
think
artistry.
yeah. Well, that was to me a classic MMA fight that I'll never forget with the Greg
Yeah.
Jackson speed. I mean, that was like right out of a Rocky movie because Condit was just getting smoked. It wasn't even
Mhm.
close. And
Yep.
Greg Jackson is normally, shit. He sounds like like an
Yoda.
effeminate guidance counselor. No, he's like telling John Jones, "Find your waterfall. Please
Yeah. Yeah.
calm. We're having fun." And for him to, get all red faced and veins popping out and spit when he's yelling and giving that speech, hell, I was fired up after that. And have Condit go out and follow it to a T and win. It was pretty much
Yeah,
classic.
it
But
was a classic moment. And I think it was a learning experience for Rory McDonald. I think he really learned something about what heart is, what grit is, what determination is, and how a fight can get away from you at this level against top competitors. And so I don't think he's definitely going to be looking not to make that mistake against Penn. Of course, the way he's talking, he's saying, I'm going to come out and hurt that guy. I want to finish him. I want to humiliate him. I want to crush him. It was some of the most aggressive trash talk against BJ. And not saying anything against BJ personally, but just bragging about what he's going to do to him and being completely dismissive of BJ Penn as a factor in this fight. I mean, Rory McDonald clearly plans to impose his will, impose his game plan, and put a hurting on BJ Penn, which is not something we've seen many people do.
no, I mean, really, the only people we've seen do that are GSP and Hughes, right?
Yep, yep.
And
And Hughes
McDonald.
only did it after BJ got tired or hurt.
Right. And McDonald's got the game to do that. I mean, he can
Yep.
get on top of them and
He's got a
punish
serious
them.
length advantage.
And everyone got a little upset, but BJ, he's amazing submission grappler, but we've never seen BJ just clown people off his back.
No.
Almost all of his submissions are from a combination of his his big boxing and his wrestling. So he, you
Hmm.
know, punch people in the mouth and take them down, and he is just a monster. One of the best top gains in MMA by far, I think.
Easily, easily. Although I think that BJ, since his losses to Frankie Edgar, has had a little bit of what I call Fedor ring IQ diminishment syndrome. I mean, like
Diminishment.
diminishment. Yes, I'm going to stick with that too because
That's
it's
Yiddish
magic.
for all
It's
you kids out there.
because Fedor was a guy who was legendary for his fight IQ, legendary for his ability to phase shift from the striking to the grappling part of the game. Then he lost a fight, and then after that, he was never the same again after Verdum tapped him out. And Fedor would try to rush the win and seemed unable to put together transition phase shifts well. And I've seen a little bit of the same thing from BJ Penn. Like he would against in his second fight with Frankie Edgar, you could tell he had thought through. I never tried to take this guy down in the first fight. But once he took him down and even dominated him, he was never able to mix in the ground and pound the way he had historically against guys like Jens Pulver or Kenny Florian in the past. When BJ got you down, he put a hurting on you. And that's not something he's done since then. He wasn't able to do it to Frankie Edgar. Against John Fitch, he came in, surprised Fitch with an aggressive game plan predicated on getting the takedown, dominated the first round with that, but he didn't put a hurting on Fitch when he had him down. And Fitch was able to come back. Fitch only got the draw, but I mean anybody who saw that fight knows Fitch won the fight. He might not have won the sporting contest, but he won the fight. And then BJ's last fight since then is a loss to Nick Diaz, where he basically just got murked. I mean it was a good fight, but Diaz clearly beat him. And I think BJ's sadly I think he's in for another beating. Although I think he'll go down. I think he'll make us proud. Go out on his shield. But I
I
don't think
think
he's going to
using
win.
I totally agree too with your Fedor example
The
or an
diminishment,
analogy. That yeah, that whole diminishment thing.
it'll
Um,
get you that
and
diminishment.
and I think the key with both of those is that happened. They were on top of the world before. They were the man,
Hmm.
and people had to come to them. It's like, bitch, I'm the champ. I'm top pound for pound. Come and get me. Where after they lost, all of a sudden they were thrust into the role where they had to be the hungry guy. Same happened to Chuck Liddell. Chuck totally, I think, didn't know what his style was after when he had to go out and get people. And it's too bad Chuck retired. In that last Franklin fight, he started throwing in takedowns and looked
He
good,
was
but
he was looking great in that Franklin fight, but the chin was gone, and people
yeah,
his speech patterns are already impaired, and nobody wanted to see Chuck Liddell end up like Muhammad Ali. So it's for the
yeah.
best, but it was frustrating because he really showed a lot of technique, and he clearly trained his heart out. And I think BJ Penn might be in a similar situation. He might come in and see a whole new bag of tricks from BJ. He's clearly in excellent physical condition, probably the best he's been in since he was training with Marinovich back when he was lightweight champion in 2009. So this is a close fight. The odds makers, let's see, the odds makers are all liking McDonald
Big time.
by quite a bit, anywhere from minus 270 to minus 300.
And I think he
So,
deserves that. Like I said, absolute nightmare matchup for BJ. I think
yep,
the only person that's ever put McDonald on his back besides Condit was Mike Pyle, who's technically one of the best with his trips and
excellent
throws in the
wrestler. Yeah,
clinch. Um, the biggest thing that I look at is that someone's career trajectory is taking a dive here, because if McDonald loses this, it won't be as bad. But now that he's kind of talking shit, and
yeah.
it's gonna look really bad if he's this overconfident. And I don't, if anything, Penn deserves it's a little respect for his skills. But I mean, if BJ
And just
loses,
savagery. I
oh
mean,
yeah,
he'll
yeah,
fuck you up. I mean, BJ Penn will hurt people badly. I mean, just remember Joe Stevenson crying, covered in blood after losing the title shot to BJ Penn. It's
or BJ licking the blood off his gloves after the Hughes fight.
oh yeah, after
Um,
many a fight.
but if BJ loses this, I mean, it's going to be. I don't know if he'll be able to recover from it.
Yeah, I doubt he would fight again if he loses this fight, especially if it's a knockout or a submission.
I think you're probably right. And this is another one where I'm really torn. I mean, logically, I'm almost 100% logically that McDonald should win this fight. And I don't know if this should be my official or whether the dissection is, but I want to pick Penn really bad just because, there's a couple guys where I would feel guilty. I remember I ended up trying to be I'm a mature journalist now. I'm writing for Bloody Elbow, and I picked Brendan Schaub over Big Nog.
Mm.
And I had to take like a rape shower afterwards. I felt terrible as a person. You know what I mean? I was depressed after that. So I think I'm going to take Penn just because I would rather take Penn and have him lose and take my lumps for it and party my ass off if he wins. But I mean, if I were to not pick Penn and McDonald lost, or if I tried to be mature and logical and I picked McDonald and then Penn beat him, I can't handle another rape shower. Only one per year. So I'm going to go with BJ. I don't know how, by being the phenom, by pulling something crazy out of his ass, some kind of crazy savagery. Maybe a submission, maybe a decision. I really have no idea because I don't think it's very likely that he's going to win.
Yeah.
But
I got to go with McDonald. I'm a man of sense and judgment, but I'm with you in spirit. I totally am rooting for BJ Penn with the madness. But I mean, on the other hand, McDonald's got a bright future. He says he doesn't want to fight GSP, but he could very well take the mantle from GSP someday. And he's definitely the most exciting talent we've seen in the welterweight division. Probably the most exciting talent we've seen out of Canada since GSP. So I'm high on McDonald. I like his style. He reminds me of somebody that you would see in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, honestly. I mean, he's pasty. He's dead-eyed. He's a scary, scary, scary white man. I think anybody who's got a congenital fear like I do of inbred white killing machines should be very afraid of Roy McDonald because he is...
You need to come hang out in Michigan then. You need to come on up and join the party up here.
I've heard the lumberjacks get pretty scary out there.
I want to pick Penn because he can't afford a loss. Rory can. It's going to work out better for my own personal convenience, which is the most important thing here. So, Penn, pull something out of your ass, please.
All right, so we've got one going for the old lion, one going for the new lion. Who you got in the next old versus new matchup? We got Mauricio Shogun Hua, legendary former Pride champ, former UFC light heavyweight champ, going against the up-and-comer Alexander Gustafsson, Sweden's great blonde hope to win a UFC belt and take it back to Europe. Who you like?
I think Gustafsson deserves to be favored here, although it seems to me that the trend is all, people are a little too much, a little too low on Shogun. I mean, how can you underrate a guy like Shogun who constantly has proven people wrong? I mean, I feel like his UFC debut, he had a couple flat fights, Coleman and Forrest Griffin, and, he's constantly being held to that, where he's proven over and over in the Machida rematch and the Henderson fight. I mean,
the Henderson fight was an amazing fight, but he lost it. But I think the pair of fights against Lyoto Machida, one of which he lost, one of which he won emphatically. I think he won the first fight. I think most people agree that he solved the Lyoto Machida riddle. But then John Jones just murked him. I mean, Shogun's just been spotty. He's been spotty in his UFC run. I mean, I think since the Jones fight, he's looked great. But against Jones, clearly his knees were bothering him. This is a guy who's had multiple ACL replacement surgeries.
Yeah, like 4 or 5, right?
3, I want to say, ACL replacement surgeries, but I think he's had 5 knee surgeries. That's my guess that he's had. But I think he's only had his ACL replaced twice, which nonetheless, and I can't remember if it's both ACLs. I know he's had surgery on both knees. I can't remember if he's had the same ACL. I think he's had the same ACL replaced twice rather than tearing the ACL on both knees. Nevertheless, this is a guy who doesn't have strong knees. He's like in the Frank Shamrock zone where he can't defend takedowns and he can't get takedowns. I mean, that's not part of his game anymore.
He took Henderson down. He's got one of the best outside trips in MMA, and
that's
it's
true.
underrated.
That's true. For the record, he doesn't have a shot. He doesn't shoot in from the outside, but his trip takedowns, which has always been the linchpin of his takedown game, still work and work beautifully. So
he doesn't have explosivity. Is that even a word? Explosion? He can't explode for a shot.
His explosivity has been diminished.
High level.
Now I've forgotten the word diminishment. Yeah, his explosivity has suffered diminishment. That's
all that shit. But I think his wrestling is consummately underrated. Henderson, it's not impossible to take him down.
I mean,
but
Henderson's
it's impressive.
Always looking for that H-bomb. It is impressive, but guys, I mean, Marilla Bustamante did that back in Pride, and Jake Shields put him on his back over and over again. I don't know. I've never rated Henderson especially highly as an MMA wrestler. One of the great MMA fighters. Not wrestling's not the strong point of his game,
Well, his
ironically.
Greco is, I think. He's not, to
In the
me, the
in the
kind of guy.
clinch, yeah, yeah.
Right. He's not going to like sink low to the floor and nail singles and doubles, but I mean, in the clinch, he's an animal, you know. And so,
And
it's,
yet Shogun tripped him. I mean,
yeah, that's
it's
why, and that's kind of where I'm going with that too. Where Shields, he's got one of the best low singles around, and that's what he was doing. He was going. That was a classic example of a level change where Henderson's upright looking to land, and Shields drop levels. It was like poetry. And I mean, after a while, he was toying with Henderson a little bit,
yeah, he
but
really
Shogun.
was.
He met Hendo in his specialty, man for man in the clinch, and still took him down and beat his ass pretty bad on the ground. I don't
Yep.
think Shogun lost that fight. That's another one where draw, no clear winner. Actually, I believe myself and a lot of people scored that last round 10-8. To me, that was kind of an obvious choice, and it was just as obvious to the judges penning it in that, fuck, if I call this a 10-8, it's going to be a draw. People are going to
Yeah.
want to kill me. So I didn't think there was a clear winner in that bout at all. I
It
thought
was a great
Shogun,
fight. I thought everybody won that fight. It was like the Special Olympics. Everyone was a winner in that.
well, to me, it reinforced how tough Shogun is. I mean, he's not going to
Yeah.
roll over for
He
anyone.
took
He's one of
a
the,
he took a full H bomb to the face. I mean, a perfect
yep,
Henderson right hand to the chin. Henderson said afterwards he's never hit anybody that hard. And Shogun didn't go. I mean, he went down, but he didn't go out. It was
yep.
amazing.
So to me,
But
that was,
Gustafson doesn't have that kind of power at all.
you don't think?
Not like Henderson, not one shot kill power. I think he's got some power, and I think he's learning. He's improving. He's getting his shots are getting more powerful, but he's got nothing comparable to H bomb.
I would probably agree with that, but then we were also saying with Henderson, he just wants to land that big H bomb where Gustafson transmits good power, not H bomb power, but he does it intelligently and he does it efficiently. So
Yeah,
he uses his length from outside. He likes to circle in, sometimes to his opponent's power, but at the same time he's sighting in his own right hand, and it's long. It's like a heat-seeking missile, and it's looking really really good. I know he's been training a lot with Phil Davis and the boys.
hmm.
You can't go wrong there. Um, Man, this is one where I'm probably going to be tempted to pick all the old lions here, but um, damn, I hate to do this too, but I'll probably, just because I've done it so many on a lot of the other picks, I'll go with Gustafson on this one. I don't know how exactly. I think a decision is probably
Yeah.
likely, but I can't shake the image of Shogun clinching up with him and getting that trip takedown. And I think if Shogun gets him on the ground, he will finish him or he will
Yeah.
beat on him enough to make it a 10-8 round. Huge momentum swing if he can do that.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but I don't think he can do it. I think Gustafson's too tall to work that kind of leg trip. Get double underhooks and do the outside leg trip like Shogun wants to do. I don't see him doing that. I don't see Gustafson putting together a massive offense against Shogun either. But I think he'll do enough to outpoint him. I'm expecting a Gustafson decision here.
Well, has Gustafson, I know he's really established his takedown defense, but that's against guys like Matyushenko. Has he done it against someone who will strike with him and then, shock him with a takedown? No, I'm thinking
Um,
it's going to happen.
I don't know. Thiago Silva has a pretty good takedown game. I mean, Thiago Silva's whole game is this jiu-jitsu top game. Not his whole game, but a big part of it. And Gustafsson managed to fend that off, although it wasn't the prettiest fight. It was not the most impressive win over Thiago Silva. And Shogun is a step or two above Thiago Silva, even to this day, even with the blown knees. So I think Gustafsson's going to have his work cut out for him. I don't think he's going to look as impressive as I think some people are hoping he's going to look. I think they're hoping he's going to emerge out of this fight as a title contender against John Jones. But unless he just mauls Shogun Rua, people are not going to see him as a credible challenger to John Jones, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to take the decision, but I think he's going to be lucky to get it and get out alive. So now that brings us to the lightweight title fight between champion Benson Henderson and Nate Diaz. Who you got here, Dallas?
I'm going to go with Diaz for sure. It's usually when I pick one of the Diaz brothers, it's how I've been doing. It's a counter to logic. I really like him, but man, so Henderson so far I'm confused on his fight IQ, if it's there really, because against guys, let's see, so he fought Bocek and Miller, and he fought them in their strengths. He clinched with them, he grappled with them. And then when he fought, Frankie Edgar both times, he was perfectly content to stand there and play Frankie's game with him, which
Yep, and won both times. And I think the second fight, I don't think he deserved to win. I thought I had Edgar winning that fight, but I think in the first fight, Henderson won pretty handily, mostly because Edgar kept catching his leg and then not being able to do anything with it. He was catching Henderson's leg on kicks, and then Henderson was just too big and strong for him to take down and from there, and was punching him back. And so um, I don't know. Henderson was very impressive against Mark Bocek and Jim Miller, and that Clay Guida fight that should have been aired on Fox, but was aired on Facebook instead, was a classic. Great fight through all three dimensions of the game. But agreed, I just don't see Henderson putting it all together. He's given up so much height and reach to Nate Diaz. I think that's going to make his make it. He's going to have a harder time taking Nate down and getting inside into wrestling range on Nate, and he's not going to be able to hit Nate from the outside. I think Nate's if they're range fighting, I think Nate's going to be boxing him up.
I agree. And the other one was Anthony Pettis. That was in the final WEC fight.
A
I was
classic.
I was shocked that Henderson wasn't trying to impose his size and his strength and his wrestling a lot more. He was content to stay and trade with him. And
Yep.
I can't. Can you think of anyone besides Nunes? I mean, people don't stand up and brawl with the Diaz brothers and win. It pretty much just doesn't happen.
No, other than Carlos Condit, although he wasn't brawling, he was hit and running, but he was hitting. That's the thing people forget when they critique
Yeah.
Condit's performance in that is he was hitting, he was backing up, but he was hitting, then he'd circle away, and then he'd immediately attack again. I mean, it was a
Right.
very aggressive game from Condit. But
Because
I
of what
don't,
I just said, people wanted to see him stand there and go, but that would have been suicide for Condit
yeah,
because no one does that and wins against the
no.
Diaz brother.
But now that Condit has illustrated that template against Henderson, do you think Henderson might try it against Nate Diaz? Hit and run, back up, circle out,
He
attack?
should, but have we ever seen him do that in his entire career? Never, not
No.
once.
Henderson to me seems like somebody who's so athletic, who's so comfortable with wrestling and striking that he just likes a free for all, and he just wants to be in the moment and be zen and go with where the fight takes him rather than imposing a game plan. And I think at this level, you have to impose your game plan to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everything that you just said, I mean, it sounds crazy, but it seems like with the Diaz brothers, they're so talented and they have a certain areas where you just do not want to, don't step into that cage with the lion. But then, like you said, with the Condit blueprint, there's other areas where, like, well, the good thing about fighting such a tremendous talent and tough motherfucker is I have this little area over here that I can exploit. But
Hmm.
Henderson just hasn't shown, I don't know whether it is a willingness or whatever. He doesn't seem to, it sounds really rude, but he doesn't seem to be an intelligent fighter. He does seem to sit back there and say, I have nice hair and I'm athletic as hell and I can punch and wrestle. I mean, I'm down for whatever. And I don't mean to take anything away from the dude. His fights, all of his fights are extremely impressive. When I mentioned he fought Guida, Bocek, and Miller in their strengths, that was amazing to me. I mean, that
Yeah.
he was willing to take them on and then alternatively took on strikers in their strength. I mean, so huge balls, give him, all the respect in the world for that. But I think it's insane to do that against Nate Diaz. And not only on the feet, but both Nate and Nick are some of the most fluent guard players. I mean, before when I mentioned about BJ, I mean, of course, BJ is amazing at submissions. From his accolades in the gi, we've seen him off his back in MMA. He's amazing. Just because I said he doesn't submit anybody, it doesn't mean he's poor. But if you look at the Diaz brothers, I put them right up with Aoki, Nogueira. I mean, they are
Wow.
phenomenal on the ground. I mean, the only time we've really ever seen anyone hold them there was Stun Gun Kim against Nate. And it wasn't, I'm just going to hold you here and you can't do shit. That was the only time someone spent a good amount of time on top of a Diaz brother without them
Yeah.
creating a scramble, hitting a sweep. The way that they can go from, almost on their back, they can crouch up and roll and shoot into a takedown. It's phenomenal the way they can do that. So they're masters at creating scrambles. I know Bendo's got really good submission defense. I'm not saying Nate will necessarily submit him, but he'll put him in enough danger where it'll be, red alert,
Yeah.
emergency. I got to do whatever the hell I can to escape.
Henderson's very, very difficult to submit, though. That Pettis fight and his fight against Shane Roller, he's gotten out of some guillotines, some rear naked chokes I thought he had no business getting out of, that I thought nobody would get out of.
I totally agree, but Shane Roller and Pettis off their back versus, Diaz brothers. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
so I'm going to go Nate Diaz on this, and I'm not exactly. Usually, I don't. As I'm writing all the dissections, is where sometimes I form my clear-cut opinion on who's going to win and how. And I haven't got that far on this one, other than I know I'm going to pick Nate. Um,
The odds makers like Henderson. Everybody's got him from between minus 140 to minus 165.
and I
So
think
I
that's
was kind of surprised to see that.
where I think that's kind of deserved because
He's the champ.
yeah, Nate's history, he's been kind of a little wishy-washy. And that's what I was saying before. He's got areas where he can be exploited. Henderson seems perfectly equipped to exploit that, but he hasn't shown the mentality that he's going to do that.
It's true.
So,
If you look at Diaz's losses, Roy McDonald slammed him all over the ring. Stun Kim took him down, dominated him from the top. Gray Maynard took him down, rode him. Joe Stevenson just wrestled him up. Did some
yep.
amazing moves. I think we did a judo chop on the wrestling. Joe Stevenson did on Nate Diaz. There's some move he did a banana split or something to him that was just humiliating. Really, it was pretty silly. It made Nate look pretty bad. And then he lost to Clay Guida. So wrestling is the way to beat Nate Diaz. But Henderson I think you're right. I don't think Henderson has shown the discipline or focus in his game planning to be able to stick with a game plan like that. I think he's going to try to improvise against Nate Diaz, and I think if you improvise against Nate Diaz, that the thudding beats, it's like the goblins in the Hobbit. The drums are beating and they're beating steady, and
the
they're
goblets in
walking
the
forward. Yeah, the goblins in the
Diminished.
Hobbit. Yes, my diminishment. But
Fluent.
he's walking
Fluent.
forward. He's throwing punches. He's throwing punches and bunches, and more bunches, bigger bunches than you can imagine. I mean, the volume of punches this guy puts out is something we've never seen in MMA besides anybody but his brother Nick. And that just wears on people, punches you the body. And if Henderson tries to strike with him, I think he's going to be outclassed and worn down. And I don't think he's going to survive the fight. I mean, he's going to live to see another day, but I think he'll go out of the fight unconscious. I'm picking a Nate Diaz by stoppage.
I think from what you just said, it's tempo because every Diaz fight is about tempo, and they're unique. That other fighters go out and they try to find a certain tempo that's going to let them win. Where the Diaz brothers might be the only fighters in MMA that go out. They have a super unique tempo. That's what's it's so offbeat and off rhythm, but they go out and they keep working their tempo until eventually they just drown their opponent into it. And I don't know, other people have to
tempo. They've got the blast beat going with the punches and bunches, but if you look at their feet, it's a 1, 2, 1, 2. It's slow, it's steady, it throws guys off. It's not 4-4 time. It's funky and weird, and it's fast, but with a slow undercurrent, and it just drags guys under like a riptide.
And every once in a while, though, they'll kind of shuffle. I mean, generally they do stand pretty flat-footed. And we didn't talk about little things like, I don't know if Bendo's going to throw leg kicks. That's another area that's kind of an Achilles, proven to be an Achilles heel.
Bloody Elbows Jack Slack has done some really good analysis, mostly of BJ, but BJ uses a similar stance. BJ Penn uses a similar stance to the Diaz brothers, turn into his side, which gives him a number of advantages with his punching, but it makes him extremely vulnerable to front leg kicks. And I think, again, that's an area Ben Henderson could exploit if he has the fight IQ to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what we're questioning is this fight IQ. I'd love to see him prove us wrong. I'd love to see him put together a stellar game plan and just dissect Nick. I'm a fan of both guys. I'm not saying I'm rooting for Henderson, but it would be very exciting to see Henderson emerge to that next level as somebody who can game plan, who shows some fight IQ, who can impose his game. And I think Diaz is a puzzle that can be solved. I just don't know that Ben Henderson's the man to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And do you feel, and this will be the last thing we kind of babble on about, but there's been a little bit, since Penn left, there's been a little bit of a revolving door at lightweight where, first it was who the hell can challenge BJ, and then it was Edgar. Edgar had his little trilogy with Maynard, and then Edgar had, his back and forth with Henderson, and maybe it's just me, but I kind of get the feeling like Henderson, I don't feel confident that he's a level above the other people. That he might be,
No,
sounds rude, but temporary. Or I'm looking at the light heavyweight title picture under
lightweight.
temporary, or I'm sorry, yeah, lightweight title picture with kind of a temporary lens because there's a lot of changes here and there. And on top of that, I think between the Diaz brothers, they've been amazing. Fans love them. They've had huge wins. They've never, risen up to that championship level.
Not
Besides
in the UFC. I mean, yeah.
Right, Strikeforce, I was going to say. So, I think for the Diaz family lineage, 209, all that shit, they're due. I'm hoping Nate gets gold wrapped around his waist.
I gotta admit, I'm rooting for Nate in this one too, but I would enjoy seeing a breakout performance from Henderson. Well, that's it. I think we've broken down the whole card. I'm looking forward to the action. Thanks again, Dallas. A pleasure as always. Sorry about your pussy trouble. I hope that you can get something done about
Ah,
those out of
it'll
control kitties.
it'll diminish shortly.
Good, good. Watch out for that diminishment, and we'll be back after the fights. I'll be back with Kid Nate's bathrobe review of UFC on Fox on Sunday morning, and until then, enjoy your weekend, enjoy the fights. We'll see you next time.